I'm Billy Stewart, Assistant Pastor here at Solid Rock Tabernacle, 1325 Rudy Road in Alma, Arkansas. Thank you for joining us for the broadcast. I'd like to extend this personal invitation for you to come join us in one of our spirit-filled services. Our Sunday school begins at 9 a.m., our Sunday morning worship is at 10 a.m., and our Sunday evening worship is at 6 p.m. We also have an exciting Wednesday evening Bible study that begins at 7 p.m. Come join us, won't you? 1325 Rudy Road in Alma, Arkansas. Hey, we'll save a seat for you. And now, let's join our service already in progress.
All right. Y'all remember where we were last week? What was happening? They went to Egypt. Yeah. They were convicted. Okay. So they're all, basically, as of last week, they were all sitting around with Joseph in the room. They'd eaten and everything was going. So now we're getting in Joseph, huh? Yeah. Yeah. Now they're all back and they're all scared that they're going to prison. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So let's look what happens now. Chapter 45, verses 1 through 3. Then Joseph could not refrain himself before all of them that stood by him, and he cried, "Cause every man to go out from me." And there stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known unto his brethren. He revealed himself to them. And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live? And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. So Joseph orders the Egyptians out of the room. He says, I can't hold back anymore. He says, all you Egyptians, you get out of here. All you servants, all you other people, y'all get out of the room. All right? And he gets them out of the room, and he's alone with his brothers now. Now, imagine what his brothers may be thinking at this time, too. You know, he kicked everybody out. He don't want no witnesses as to what's going on now. Okay? But he began to cry. And the great emotion that he had shows that he did not cruelly manipulate his brothers. What had happened is everything that he did was directed by God. And everything that he did, actually, it hurt him in a way to have to do those things. So he gets them there. All the Egyptians are gone. And Joseph tells them, hey, I'm Joseph, your brother. Now, imagine what they thought. So maybe he had to show them that he was actually Joseph. Maybe he had to show them some scars or some birthmarks, ones that they knew that only Joseph had. Okay? And no, you're not Joseph. Yeah, look, hey, remember when we were when I was just 6 years old and I fell down and cut my leg or cut my arm, and here's that scar, and you know, remember when I fell off the bicycle and cut my leg open, here's that scar. They didn't have bicycles, I know, but you get what I'm saying. Yeah, sticks and stone wheels. So he convinces his brothers that, hey, he's Joseph. Now his brothers can't answer him. They're just like, you know. And it says they were dismayed. They were dismayed. And they were dismayed because they anticipated some sort of punishment now. Here we had done all this stuff to this guy, and now he's Pharaoh's second in command, and he's got us here, and oh no, he's got all of us here. This is going to be bad, and I'm sure that's going through their minds. Oh man, this is not good. This is not good. But the great emotion of Joseph and his manner of revelation to them, and the total shock of them learning that he was not only alive. Remember, they had sold him into slavery, and they probably thought, oh, he's dead by now. Not only that he was alive, but now he's standing right there in front of them. They were just like, now the Bible says dismayed. But that Hebrew word for dismayed here is bahal. And bahal means to tremble inwardly, to be alarmed, agitated, or anxious. And I'm sure they were all of those. They didn't know what was going on. But now we're going to read in the next verse that he says, come near to me. And this come near to me where he says this implies that his brothers probably cringed back in terror. They were afraid. Oh no, we've done all this stuff to him. Now we're really in for it. Now there are some legends. There's a Jewish legend, and this is only legend, but it is one of the Jewish legends that says that the brothers were so shocked that their souls left their bodies. Which means basically they died. Okay? It scared them to death. And it was only by the miracle of God that their souls came back. Right? So that's just a legend that isn't recorded anywhere in the Bible, but it's just a way to kind of show how scared that they actually were because of this. Right? Now, this dismay, it was a preview, or it is a preview and a prophecy of what will happen when the Jewish people see Jesus again. And they'll finally see him for who he is. You see, the first time he came, they didn't recognize him for who he was. But the second time he comes, now they're going to see him for who he really is. The first time he came as a lamb. Next time he's coming as a lion, the Lion of Judah. So they didn't recognize him the first time because they saw the Messiah as coming as a conquering king. And he didn't do that the first time. But the next time that he comes, when he comes back, he'll be coming as a conquering king. Now let's look at verses 4 through 8. And Joseph said unto his brethren, come near to me, I pray you. And they came near. And he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt. Now therefore be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves, that ye sold me hither. For God did send me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land. And yet there are 5 years in which there shall neither be earing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve you a prosperity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. So Joseph basically came right out to him. He was blunt about it. He told them what their sin was. He said, this is what you did. You sold me into Egypt. Yet, in his compassion, Joseph didn't want them to be grieved or angry with themselves. He wanted them to forgive themselves because he had already forgiven them. Joseph was past his grief, was past his anger. He had already forgiven him. And he wanted his brothers to be past it also. Now, don't get me wrong. Joseph did not diminish what his brothers did. He said, look, you did this to me, and it wasn't right, but he saw God's promise in all of this was greater than the evil of his brothers. So when we are sinned against, we're tempted to fail in one or both of these areas. Are we not? We're either tempted to pretend the offending party didn't do anything to us. Have you ever done that? Have you ever pretended that, I'll stew in my own gravy and just kind of be upset, and I'll pretend like nothing happened. All right? So we either do that, or we're tempted to ignore the hand of God in every circumstance. See, no matter what happens, God's hand is in it for whatever reason. God says He works all things together for His glory. So even the bad stuff that happens to us happens for a purpose. Okay? All of Joseph's sorrows were for a purpose. And God used them to preserve His family and provide the conditions for it to become a nation. See, Joseph was the victim of men. But what did God do? God turned it around for His glory. None of what happened was for loss. If this family did not go into Egypt, if Israel did not go into Egypt, all of his brothers, all the people, and we're going to see how many went in a little while. But if all of those people did not go into to Egypt, then they would have assimilated among the pagan tribes of Canaan. They would have started marrying, intermarrying, and just been assimilated into all of that. But they're coming to Egypt. If they'd assimilated with all the pagans of Canaan, they would have quit being a distinct people. Okay? But God put them in a place where they could grow, yet remain a distinct nation. Remember, the Egyptians thought anybody who's not Egyptian was beneath them. The Egyptians believed they descended from gods. They are the descendants of God. So they didn't hang around with, they didn't associate with, this was the ultimate racism of the day. They didn't do it. They said, no, we're not going to hang around these people. So by bringing the Hebrew children, by bringing the children of Israel into Egypt, they were able to be set apart from the Egyptians and have their own distinct nation, be their own distinct people. Okay? Joseph realized that God ruled his life. Not good men, not evil men, not circumstances or fate. God was in control. And because He is and was, all things work together for good. Okay. Verses 9 through 15. Haste ye, and go up to my father, and say unto him, Thus saith thy son Joseph, God hath made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down unto me, tarry not. And thou shalt dwell in the land of Goshen, and thou shalt be near unto me, thou and thy children, and thy children's children, and thy flocks, and thy herds, and all that thou hast. And there will I nourish thee, for yet there are 5 years of famine, lest thou and thy household and all that thou hast come to poverty. And behold, your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that it is my mouth that speaketh unto you. And ye shall tell my father of all my glory in Egypt, and of all that ye have seen, and ye shall haste and bring down my father hither. And he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck. Moreover, he kissed all his brethren, and wept upon them, And after that, his brethren talked to him. So this was a message that Joseph wanted his brothers to bring to his father. Thus say Joseph. Okay? Now, when Jacob eventually hears this, what do you think Jacob did? This was probably the greatest day of Jacob's life. Wow, my favorite son, the one I thought was dead, he's alive. He had the joy of learning that his favored son was alive, who would save his brethren, who was given up for dead, is now alive. It says he kissed his brethren and wept upon them. Joseph was affectionate and loving to all his brothers. Probably a little bit more to Benjamin, because Benjamin was his full brother. But he was affectionate to all of them. He didn't exclude those who had been especially cruel to him. He didn't say, no, Judah, no, you're the one who suggested that they sell me into slavery anyway. No, I'm not going to have anything to do with this. His heart was open to his brothers. And he was open to them both as a group and individually as well. And it says, after that, his brethren talked with him. Can you imagine what kind of conversation that had to have been? You forgiving me? Joseph, what's going on? What happened? How did you get here? How did this happen? And Joseph's saying, what about Dad? How's Dad doing? What's going on? What's going on with all these other people? What's happening there? It was a big family reunion they had going on. All right, verses 16 to 24. And the fame thereof was heard in Pharaoh's house, saying, Joseph's brethren are come, and it pleased Pharaoh well and his servants. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, say unto thy brethren, this do ye, lade your beast, and go, get you unto the land of Canaan, and take your father and your households, and come unto me. And I will give you the good of the land of Egypt, and ye shall eat the fat of the land. Now thou art commanded, this do ye, take your wagons out of the land of Egypt, for your little ones and for your wives, and bring your father, and come. Also regard not your stuff, for the good of all the land of Egypt is yours. And the children of Israel did so. And Joseph gave them wagons according to the commandment of Pharaoh, and gave them provisions for the way. To all of them he gave each man changes of raiment. But to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of raiment. And to his father he sent after this manner 10 asses laden with good things of Egypt, and 10 she-asses laden with corn and bread and meat for his father by the way. So he sent his brethren away, and they departed, and he said unto them, see that ye fall not out by the way. So the sons of Israel, all the brothers, received transportation, provision, garments, and even the riches of Egypt itself. And they received all of that because of who their favored brother was. Now Pharaoh blessed them, but he didn't bless them because they were the sons of Israel. He blessed the sons of Jacob for Joseph's sake, because they were the brothers of Joseph. Okay? Now, to return to Canaan with carts from Egypt, that would be the cultural equivalent to landing a jumbo jet among a tribe of isolated savages. When they came back in with all the stuff from Egypt, It had to have been, wow, what is this? Okay? It would be the stuff that legends are made of. Now now look what Joseph tells them. He says, see that you fall not out by the way. Now the idea of this means, as y'all are going, don't become angry with each other. Don't quarrel. Don't get into a big fight with each other. Because Joseph knew that as soon as these men left his presence, they would be tempted to act in selfish and unspiritual ways. And what they had to do was to anticipate this so that they could guard against something like this happening. Okay? All right. Verses 25 to 28. And they went up out of Egypt and came into the land of Canaan unto Jacob their father, and told him, saying, Joseph is yet alive, and he is governor over all the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart fainted, for he believed them not. And they told him all the words of Joseph, which he had said unto them. And when he saw the wagons which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived. And Israel said, it is enough. Joseph my son is yet alive. I will go and see him before I die. Now Jacob had been told, remember, years ago, Joseph's dead. And he believed them. All this time he's been believing that Joseph's dead. Now he's told that he's alive. Well, he doesn't believe it. Because he'd been believing for so long that he was dead. So that's a problem we have with ourselves nowadays. Okay? We get told the lie so much that we start believing the lie, that when we do hear the truth, we don't want to believe the truth. Because it's more convenient to believe the lie. Okay? But that's not, but they convinced him, hey, no, Joseph is alive. And until his son told him the words of Joseph and showed him the blessings that came to them, after he saw all of that, then he believed that Joseph was alive. And he believed he was alive. Even though he hadn't seen him yet, he believed he was alive. Now let's use this as an analogy. We can say that the only way people will know Jesus is alive if we tell them his words and show them his blessings in our lives. That's the way people are going to know. Because the world has been telling everybody Jesus and God is dead. But Jesus and God are not dead. And the only way that they're going to know that he is alive is if we tell him his words and show him his blessing in our lives. Yeah. Now, knowing that the favored son was alive, back from the dead, as it were, it changed Israel's testimony from everything is against me. Remember, coming up to this, it was always everything is against me. Everything is against me. Nobody likes me. Everybody hates me. I think I'll go eat a worm. You know. Have you ever felt that way? Everything's against me. And that's how he felt. Everything is against me. But it changed it from everything against me to it is enough. It's enough to know that Joseph is alive. This testimony of faith came from Israel, not Jacob. Jacob and Israel were the same person, but remember, God changed Jacob's name from Jacob to Israel. So the faith came from Israel, the new person, not Jacob. All right? When Jacob was in charge, we saw that whining, self-pitying, complaining, unbelieving type of man. Okay? In contrast, Israel, the man God had conquered, had a testimony of faith. Jacob often struggled with doubts and fears. Here he believed in Joseph the way we should believe in Jesus. Jacob believed because he had enough evidence to convince him. Jacob acted because he had conviction great enough to move him. All right? That takes us through chapter 45. Now we're going to get into chapter 46. Okay? Hey, we're getting through 2 chapters tonight. We're going to move. Yeah, we're moving right along. Cooking with Crisco. Yeah, it was there. We're gonna get through chapter 46 pretty quick too. It's not as bad as it looks as far as how many is there. All right. Genesis 46 verses 1 to 4. And Israel took his journey with all that he had, and came to Beersheba, and offered sacrifices unto God of his father Isaac. And God spake unto Israel in the visions of the night, and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, Here am I. And he said, I am God, the God of thy father. Fear not to go down into Egypt, for I will there make of thee a great nation. I will go down with thee into Egypt, and I will surely bring thee up again. And Joseph shall put his hand upon thine eyes. So Jacob packed up everything, lock, stock, and barrel. He didn't leave a crumb behind. He picked up everything. And he came to the southernmost outpost of Canaan on the way to Egypt. And he stopped there in Beersheba to honor God with sacrifices. Now, if you remember, both Abraham and Isaac lived for a little while at Beersheba. Okay? And Israel's grandfather, Abraham, planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba. And many years before, he had called on the name of the Lord there. What else happened there? Well, Isaac received a special promise from God and built an altar for sacrifice there. It was probably at this very place that Israel sacrificed, remembering what God had done before. It said, God spake unto Israel in the visions of the night. More than 40 years before, when Jacob was about to leave the promised land, God spoke to him in a dream. Genesis 28. Okay? Now, when he was about to leave the land again, God brought assurance to him through a dream. Yes. Yeah. It's a very sacred place for them. And God speaks to him again, and he says, Fear not to go down into Egypt. Now, this strongly suggests and tells us that even though Israel was happy to go and see Joseph, he was still a little bit afraid to go there. Okay? Jacob may have remembered that Abraham had gone to Egypt. And he went to Egypt in a time of famine once before. And it was an expression of his unbelief when he went that time. And because of that, a lot of evil eventually came. Okay? Back in Genesis 12, verses 10 to 20. He may also have remembered that God told his father Isaac not to go down into Egypt in Genesis 26:2. Also, Jacob knew God told Abraham that his descendants would be strangers in a land that was not theirs and would serve them, and they would be afflicted for 400 years. Genesis 15:13. Okay? So as Jacob led his family into this foreign land, he didn't know for sure what the future held. And at that time, at the same time, he knew the future was in God's hands. And as Israel connected with God, with what God did in the past, he was assured of God's plan for the future. We hesitate a lot of times to do things because we're afraid of what we do. We're afraid to do things. We're afraid to step out. We're afraid to get out of our comfort zone. We're afraid to say, "Hey, I'm going to do this thing." Even though we can be assured God speaks to us and says, "This is what I want you to do," we're still afraid. But when we look back at what God has done, we can be assured of what God is going to do. But we have to look back on what God has done for us and know that God is still in control and He is still going to do things for us. And God said, "I will there make of thee a great nation." God told Israel what His purpose was in bringing the large family or clan to Egypt. He says, "I'm going to get you out of this area and bring you over to Egypt so that you can be a great nation." Because of the segregated nature of Egyptian life, Israel's descendants could grow as a large, distinct nation. Okay? So in essence, what happened here is Egypt became like a mother's womb to Israel as a nation, when they grew from something small to something full size. The great reason Jacob did not need to fear the journey to Egypt was that God promised to bring him back to the promised land. He said, "This is the promised land. Yes, I'm bringing you over there to make you a great nation, but I'm going to bring you back to the promised land. You're going to get to go back. The family is going to get to go back. The nation is going to get to go back." Although this would be after Jacob's death, but it would be fulfilled. Egypt would never be a permanent home for Israel and his children. The final assurance was for God Himself to tell Jacob that Joseph lived and would care for him until his dying day. Now, after going all these years believing that Joseph was dead, hearing this was some sweet assurance to Jacob's ears. Now, Genesis 46, 5 to 27, we're only going to look up to verse 8. "And Jacob rose up from Beersheba, and the sons of Israel carried Jacob their father and their little ones and their wives in the wagons which Pharaoh had sent to carry him. And they took their cattle and their goods, which they had gotten in the land of Canaan, and came into Egypt, Jacob and all his seed with him, his sons and his sons' sons with him, his daughters and his sons' daughters, and all his seed brought he with him into Egypt." Now, verses 8 to 27 basically goes through all the names of everybody that came. So we're not going to go through all the names. Yeah, we're not going to go through all the names of all the people that went on that, because that's a lot of people that were there. But altogether that they took on there were 70 people. So he had 70 people that went with him. Now in Genesis 45:27, we saw how important the carts were to Jacob. His spirit revived when he saw this impressive wealth and technology from Egypt. And yes, it was, to them, this was some heavy-duty technology that they had there. All right? And, yeah. That is small right now, but we're going to see something on that. Okay? In just a minute. Israel brought his entire family down to Egypt. Everybody. Every man, woman, child, cat, dog, goat, horse, everything. Camel, it all came with him. And this shows the great faith that he had. No one, he didn't leave anybody behind in Canaan to continue a presence there. Jacob was both all in, and he knew that they would all be back. Okay? Now, the sons of Judah are a special note here, because the sons of Judah, anybody know why the sons of Judah are a special note? Why it's important? Did you say something, Sister Jen? No? Okay. Anybody know? Yep, that's the messianic line. Judah was the messianic lineage that brought Christ. Okay? So the line of descent to this point went like this: Abraham to Isaac, to Jacob, to Judah, to Perez, to Hezron. And it will continue down all the way to Jesus. Now, the total number, when I said there were 70 people, the total number of males, just the men in this clan, was 70. Okay? So there were 66 people, plus 66 men, plus Jacob himself, Joseph and his two sons, and this large family would become a nation of perhaps more than 2 million people in 400 years. So they went from 70 to over 2 million. Yeah, pretty big jump. Now, like a lot of things, a lot of great many works that we see that come from God, okay, Israel had a slow beginning. From the time that God called Abraham, it took at least 25 years to add one son, Isaac. It took 60 years to add another son, Israel. It took 50 or 60 years for Jacob to add 12 sons and one daughter. But in 400 years, Israel would leave. I don't know why I put 430. But in 400 years, Israel would leave Egypt with 600,000 men. Men. Okay? When you start looking at the growth of the men, women, children, everything, it was close to 2 million people. It took his family 215 years to grow from 1 to 70. But in another 400, I don't know why I keep putting 430. I keep missing. But in another 400 years, they grew to over 2 million people. Okay? So, look at that. 215 years to go from 1 to 70. And in twice that time, they went from 70 to over 2 million. That's pretty good. Yeah. It was growing. Now in Acts 7:14, it says that there were 75 who went into Egypt. All right? And a lot of people will use this as saying, see, contradiction. Genesis says that there were 70. In Acts, Stephen says that there were 75. But there's a reason for this. The reason is because Stephen is quoting from the Septuagint. Y'all know what the Septuagint is. Remember the Septuagint. Septuagint was the Greek translation of the Hebrew scripture. So it was, they translated it from Hebrew to Greek. And when they made it into Greek, there was, either it was miswritten somehow, but this is what Stephen is quoting from. So this number is not really wrong. It was just arrived at in a different way. Specifically, it added 5 more sons or grandsons of Joseph that were born in Egypt. That's how they came across that. Right? Okay, now that we know that, let's jump down to verses 28 to 30. And he sent Judah before him unto Joseph to direct his face unto Goshen. And they came into the land of Goshen. And Joseph made ready his chariot, and he went up to meet Israel his father to Goshen, and presented himself unto him. And he fell on his neck, and wept on his neck a good while. And Israel said unto Joseph, Now let me die, since I have seen thy face, because thou art yet alive. Now it was fitting that Judah did this, because Judah was from the Messianic line. And he demonstrated, as we saw before, he's the one that demonstrated the true spirit of repentance with all of that. And he's the one that changed the heart among Joseph's brothers. The reunion of Israel with Joseph was more than he ever dreamed of. Joseph was always looking for this reunion. Jacob had thought that he was dead. Okay? But when he had heard that the news that the favored son was alive, now he sees him. It's fulfilled. Okay? It's a dramatic change from Genesis 42:36. Remember when he says, all things are against me? Everybody's against me. Nothing's going my way. To now, I've got all of my sons together, and the favored son is alive. All right, let's look at verses 31 to 34. And Joseph said unto his brethren and unto his father's house, I will go up and show Pharaoh, and say unto him, My brethren and my father's house, which were in the land of Canaan, are come unto me. And the men are shepherds, for their trade hath been to feed cattle, and they have brought their flocks and their herds, all that they have. And it shall come to pass, when Pharaoh shall call you and say, What is your occupation? That you shall say, Thy servant's trade hath been about cattle from our youth, even until now, both we and our fathers, that ye may dwell in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is an abomination unto the Egyptians. So Joseph became the representative, the advocate for his family. And they had come safely into Egypt, but they needed Joseph to represent them before Pharaoh. See, not just anybody could go up and see Pharaoh. Now, in the same manner as this, the believers, we need Jesus to represent us. Okay? Now, the Pharaohs, after Joseph dies, the Pharaohs forgot about Joseph. And of course, we'll see later, they made the people of Israel slave. But this shows what would happen if we had no representation or advocate before God. But Jesus is our eternal representative. You see, if we didn't have Jesus to represent us, we would become slaves to sin. But we have Jesus. He's our advocate. He's the one that's always fighting. He's our attorney. He's always the one that's fighting for us in heaven. Okay? Because remember, we got somebody fighting against us in heaven too. If you remember, it says Satan is the accuser of the brethren. And people say, well, how can he do it? Satan still has access to heaven. He still has access to the presence of God. Otherwise, how would he be able to accuse the brethren? We see it in Job, to where it says that he was there before God, accusing Job. Yeah. But we have to have an advocate. And that advocate, if we've got the prosecutor, the persecutor on one side, Satan, Lucifer, saying, look what he did, look what he did, look what he did. Look at this, look at this, look at this. And Jesus on the other side saying, no, I already paid for that. I already took care of that. That's already been taken care of. Okay? And he is our eternal representative. Now they came into Egypt and God had a place for his people. He didn't bring them to Egypt and not give them a home. They had to have a place to live. So it wasn't enough for Joseph to provide for their needs in Canaan, which he had done by selling them the grain. He had to bring them to a place prepared for them. Now we see Jesus in both aspects here as well. He takes care of us here in the present. Right? Takes care of us right now and all that we've done. But he's also gone to heaven to prepare a place for us. And since he's gone to heaven to prepare a place for us, then he will receive us unto himself. All right? Now, the Egyptians were an agricultural, in a sense that they farmed crops. They were farmers. Okay? They were able to, they grew grain and all of this stuff. They were able to do that. But they considered sheep to be unclean animals. And therefore, they detested shepherds. So, God had a place for his people. But it was a different place. Now, sometimes it was a despised place, but it was a place for them nonetheless. And they went down to Goshen, and that's where they were allowed to stay. Okay? And they were allowed to grow into a nation. All right? And that brings us to the end of chapter 46. Woohoo! We got through 2 chapters and still got through a little early. All right? Any questions, comments, concerns, amens, oh me's? Okay. Huh? Okay. Don't forget Sunday morning is normal service, and Sunday night we will be having the 37th anniversary here. So y'all be here for that. Is anything that we need to? Yes.
The women will be decorating tomorrow at 3, and Sunday morning for those who bring their breakfast and eat at church.
Thank you for joining us today. We pray you were blessed by the broadcast. If you have a prayer request or questions about Solid Rock Tabernacle, please visit our website at www.solidrocktabernacle.org.
That's www.solidrocktabernacle.org. On behalf of the pastors and congregation here at Solid Rock Tabernacle, we pray you have a blessed week, and we invite you to join us in person or on one of our future broadcasts.